Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, from healthcare reform to last summer's debt ceiling debacle, America's politics these days seems driven by a partisan fervor that's been rarely seen in the recent past. Now, my guest today says that America's government is broken, more broken perhaps than at any time in his recent memory, and that the current Congress is perhaps the worst ever. Full stop. Norman Ornstein, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be with you.
You are well known in the United States. You're a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. You also are a political analyst who appears on lots of U.S. media. And you have been an observer of sort of Washington's byways, the way Washington works, or as the case may be, doesn't work for the past 42 years. And you've come to the conclusion, you wrote in a book a few years back, which was widely noticed and received across Washington, that you called Congress the broken branch. And you said that that Congress back then was basically dysfunctional. You seem to think today, you're now writing a new book, this is even worse. The current Congress, more dysfunctional, more broken. What's changed?
You know, the last 5 years have seen a significant deterioration in our politics. First, there's sharply more polarization. We had voting ratings done by a magazine, National Journal. Last year showed in the United States Senate the most conservative Democrat was to the left of the most liberal Republican. No overlap between the parties. Now, we're not a parliamentary system. We're not used to this. We've usually had substantial overlap between the parties, and in our system with the separation of powers, the different institutions that are independent, you've almost needed it.
So Democrats could have been Republicans, there was that...
You could usually find a bipartisan coalition to make things happen. Now we have the equivalent of parliamentary parties, especially the Republican Party, and that's where the biggest change has taken place. A Republican Party that has become dominated by its ideological extreme.
Some people would say it's been held hostage to a certain extent by a fringe, sort of very religious-based radical right. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it's so much even the religious-based radical right. Partly what's happened in the last 2 years is the Republicans, when Obama came in, behaved as a parliamentary minority, denied him every vote on virtually everything, tried to make the system look as contentious and messy as possible. So even if he won victories, they would look really bad. Then, because of the financial crisis, this populist conservative movement, the Tea Party movement, emerged, and the Republicans rode it to a big victory in our midterm elections last November. They thought they could co-opt that Tea Party movement, which is less religious but more radical on economic issues, on its hatred for government in Washington. In fact, they've been co-opted by the Tea Party movement.
But why? What I don't understand is this, and a lot of people maybe watching from over here don't understand. The Tea Party is still a relatively small minority in the realm of American politics. Why have the Republicans allowed themselves to have the terms dictated to them in this way by the Tea Party?
You know, one part of it, frankly, is that we have a conservative media now. Rush Limbaugh on the radio, Fox News, which caters to these people. And even though we have many issues in which a majority of Republicans are more to the center, the leaders all are much more concerned about the small group who happen to be the ones who vote in primaries and in caucuses. So just to pick one example, we had a very conservative senator named Robert Bennett of the state of Utah who made the mistake of working with a liberal Democrat on a health reform bill. For that alone, his fringe element denied him the ability to even run for his seat again. And that's
sort of
reverberated.
Out. He's been, and I guess you could make the same case for Mitt Romney, whose health care plan originally very much resembled, I guess, what Obama ended up passing universally, and now he's been forced to sort of retreat and retract.
He's been forced to retreat as much as he can without looking completely foolish, but even more significant, look at Mitt Romney on immigration, where he's moved to the right of Newt Gingrich and of Rick Perry and has taken a position that is embarrassingly anti-immigrant and nativist.
It's very interesting, all of these candidates that you're mentioning here, because when you watch them over here, we all saw Rick Perry's now famous blunder where he forgot his own platform, essentially. Mm-hmm. We saw Herman Cain, who's now withdrawn from the race, making a big fumble on a question about Libya. It seems that the level of knowledge or the requirements to be a viable candidate, even a front runner, have fallen. Am I incorrect?
No, you're not incorrect, sadly enough. Look, a part of this is, and it's a good part of the problem that has worsened, Americans are upset and angry with government. Now, partly they're upset because we're in the midst of the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. It's a crisis caused by a financial meltdown. They last much longer and have more enduring effects, so people are unhappy. They're unhappy because they look at Washington that seems to be much more concerned about scoring points and undercutting the other side than solving problems. But the response is, anybody who stands up and says, I'm not a part of that, I'm not like the rest of them in Washington, gains traction.
It's an outsider status, which now, outside the so-called Beltway, which is what
And so you can see a Herman Cain, who becomes for a period of time the Republican front runner because he doesn't know anything about policy, because he's a businessman who will clean things up. And in the end, he faltered and was forced out of the campaign, not so much because he couldn't even answer a basic question about Libya, but because of his response to multiple cases of sexual harassment and affairs.
You're Barack Obama. You're heading into what looks to be a very tough election year. How do you fight this? What do you do if you're Barack Obama going up against a field of candidates who are and seem willing and determined to say anything to cut you down?
Well, one of the things that Barack Obama wants to do is, probably at the top of his list, is to make sure we don't sink into a double-dip recession or, even worse, become part of a global depression. That's why his fate may actually be more in the hands of Angela Merkel than it is of the American voter. The second thing you want to do is to try to draw those distinctions. And Obama has taken on a different tone in the last couple of months. He's become the populist himself. He's drawing the line between the 99% and the 1%, the elite, super rich, because inequality has grown much sharper and Americans feel it much greater. He's calling out the do-nothing Republican Congress to try and put them on the defensive and put blame where it is.
He's taking the gloves off a little bit and is fighting a bit now.
It's a very different approach than he used to get elected as the post-partisan healer. But what's become necessary because the other side does not want to cooperate or compromise with him. The third thing, and this is the time-honored, we saw this, for example, with George W. Bush when he ran for re-election from a very unfavorable position, is you want to make sure that voters look at your opponent and say, that's a bridge too far. We need change, but it's got to be somebody who's an acceptable risk. And basically, Bush was able to do that with John Kerry, and Obama may not have to work as hard at it because the Republicans are doing it themselves.
They might be their own worst enemy. And yet, Barack Obama is still smeared, I'll use the word smear, I know that's a loaded word, as a socialist and a radical. And yet, here in Europe, people look at him, he appears relatively centrist. He might actually be a member of Nicolas Sarkozy's party if he were here.
When we talk about dysfunction and talk about this being the worst case of politics gone astray in America than I've seen in 42 years, a good part of it is what matters now is not so much what the policies are, but who's promoting them. So if you look at the health care plan that Republicans have called a socialist takeover, a government takeover of our health care system, the Affordable Care Act that's called Obamacare, there is no government plan in it. It relies on a marketplace of insurance plans. The mandate for coverage was taken from the very conservative Heritage Foundation. The Obama health care plan is in effect...
It's a Republican plan,
It's a Republican
is what you're saying.
That came first out of the alternative to Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton's health care plan in 1993, grafted onto Mitt Romney's plan. But not a single Republican voted for a plan that's a Republican plan.
We are running out of time, but in the little time I have left, it would sound like most Republican presidents of the past have essentially been socialists as well, right? No Republican president has not been able to pursue some form of socialist
And of course, George W. Bush did the greatest expansion of national health insurance with Medicare prescription drugs since Lyndon Johnson in 1965.
And no one called George Bush a socialist.
No. And every Republican president has pursued comparable policies. Obama is progressive, you know, what passes for a liberal in American politics. But most of all, he's pragmatic. He looks for solutions to problems. The big problem he's had is he has nobody on the other side who wants to cooperate. And of course, the Senate Republican leader has said his #1 goal is not to solve these economic problems, it's to make Obama a one-term president.
Very briefly, brief. Does Barack Obama have a good chance of being reelected? Can he fight off any challenger they throw at him on the Republican side?
Right now, you'd rather be Obama than anybody else. But with an economy that could end up going much further down, it's precarious.
It's precarious, but not impossible.
Not impossible, and indeed, he's in better shape than any of these Republicans.
And he has all the Occupy Wall Street movements now, sort of all that ferment beginning. You think he'll latch on to that, perhaps?
I don't think as directly as others, but yes, he is going to be standing with the 99% that the Occupy Wall Street movement talks about against the super rich. And right now, even though it wouldn't work 20 years ago in America, because Americans don't envy the rich, they want to be rich, now the great level of inequality has changed that.
So the dynamic is changing a little bit. Norman Ornstein, thank you very much. Resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and a keen observer of congressional politics in Washington, dating back, I think, 1969. Oh. We've been talking...
Don't remind me.
Well, we've been talking today about American government. Is it broken? Does Barack Obama stand a chance against the emerging Republican field? Thank you very much for watching the interview here on France 24.